When researchers present to non-experts, most presentations fail for one simple reason. Not because the research is too complex, but because explanation is wrong. Clarity is not about simplifying content, it's about choosing the right way to explain it. In many conference and public-facing settings, audiences decide whether to keep listening within the first 60 to 120 seconds. If you lose them early, even very strong research struggles to land. Coming from a professor and a researcher who regularly explains very complex research to non-expert audiences, I've learned that clarity comes from structure and audience awareness, not from dumbing things down. One of the most important things to get right is understanding who your audience is. This sounds obvious, but it's often overlooked. If you're speaking to experts in your field, you don't need to remove jargon. You can speak at the technical level because the background is shared. But if your audience is mixed or largely outside your field, that assumption breaks communication immediately. I see this very clearly in my teaching, for example. When I lecture to master's students from biomedical engineering, my explanations usually look very different from when I teach students from electrical engineering. The content may be similar, but the entry point has to change. Non-expert communication fails when we assume people know what we know. Another common reason the explanations fail is starting in the wrong place. Many researchers explain mechanisms before establishing purpose. They explain how something works before explaining why it matters. If the audience does not understand the purpose of the work, it's very difficult for them to stay engaged. That's why the first 2 minutes of a presentation are so important. If you want to explore that in detail, I explain it step by step in my video on how to start a research presentation. Useful mental shift is this. Mechanisms answer how, purpose answers why. For non-expert audiences, why must come first. Only then does how become meaningful. This is where analogies become very powerful. Analogies are one of the most effective tools for explaining complex research to non-experts. They connect unfamiliar ideas to something the audience already understands, to something from everyday life. A useful rule of thumb is one analogy per core idea. If you need multiple analogies to explain the same concept, then the concept itself probably not clear yet. Let me give you a concrete example from my own work. When I speak to technical audiences, I generally might say that I work on microfluidic platforms for biomedical applications. That works because the audience already knows what microfluidics is. But if I speak to non-experts, that explanation probably will fail. So instead, I explain it differently. So I say that microfluidic devices are small rectangular devices with tiny channels, often less than a millimeter width. I compare those channels to irrigation canals, just how irrigation canals bring nutrients and water to plants, just like that. Microchannels allow us to bring nutrients and some signals to cells located inside the microchannels. The function becomes clear without technical detail. That is exactly what an analogy is supposed to do. Analogies should explain function, not replace science. Visuals work in a very similar way. When using slides with non-expert audiences, images are often far more effective than text. This is my number one rule generally. A useful guideline is one idea per slide and often no more than 5 to 7 words or no text at all. If people are reading your slide, they are not listening to you. Images shift attention back to the speaker. I learned this very clearly during a 3-minute thesis competition during my PhD. You are allowed only one slide in 3 minutes to explain your research to lay audience, to a general audience. I remember I used a simple diagram and relied heavily on analogies. Many people understood the core idea without any technical background. That experience stayed with me for a long time, so leveraging on images is a very useful technique. Language choices matter as well. Avoid unnecessary jargon, avoid long, complex sentences, especially avoid equations when speaking to non-technical audience, to non-experts. The moment an equation appears, a large part of the audience mentally checks out generally, even if the math is simple. This doesn't mean equations are bad, they simply belong in a different context. Pace also matters more than people realize. When speaking to non-experts, slowing down by about 10 to 15% makes a noticeable difference. Clarity often comes from space, not speed. Pauses are not mistakes. They give people time to think. There are situations where technical detail is appropriate, specialist audiences, technical discussions, but with mixed or non-expert audiences, clarity should always come first. You can always say, I'm happy to go into technical details if that would be useful. That signals confidence, not simplification. A simple self-check I often use in my work is this. If someone outside your field can explain your work to you in 2 or 3 sentences, you've done a good job. If they cannot, the explanation needs adjustment. To summarize, know who your audience is. First, very important. Establish purpose before mechanism. Explain function clearly. Use analogies deliberately. Design slides for listening. Remove unnecessary barriers. Slow down slightly and focus on intuition, not technical mastery. If you can explain your research clearly to non-experts, you significantly expand your impact. This skill helps with funding panels, interdisciplinary work, industry collaboration, and leadership roles, of course. If this video was useful, watch the other one on how to start a research presentation where I break down the first 2 minutes step by step. Thanks for your attention. See you next time.